Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, we're talking about how to raise money-smart kids and build lifelong financial habits early. I'm joined by John Lanza, Chief Mammal at the Art of Allowance Project and a leading voice in youth financial literacy. John, welcome to the podcast.
Tony, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Enjoyed being on your podcast, so it's great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and what led you to focus on financial literacy for kids?
Yeah, Tony, so I came at this kind of probably like many folks, which is I had an itch to scratch. And that itch happened to be a young kid who my wife and I, we knew we wanted to raise, at the time it was one kid, eventually became two kids, but we knew we wanted to raise them money smart, right? That was just something that we wanted for them. And I came from entertainment. So I produced animation back in the 90s. And my first thought was, why don't we make this fun for kids? And so I looked into it and thought about it a little bit and then came up with this idea, the Money Mammals, and then brought it to my most skeptical friend. And I said, okay, Vince, take this and I want you to tell me why I shouldn't do it. And 2 weeks later, after a lot of research, and this is before Google, Google was there, but it was harder to research. He came back and he said, you have to do this. There's nothing else out there that is getting kids excited about money. And so the Money Mammals, really what they are is a group of characters headed by Joe the monkey. They sing and dance, and their message is about making money smarts fun. And the mantra is we'll share and save and spend smart too. And so that kind of kicked everything off for us, was this first movie. And then very quickly after that, we realized that one of the best ways to potentially get this out there would be to work with great community institutions like credit unions. And so we created a program that went far beyond just the movie. So now we have games and apps, and I've written 3 kids books that are tied into the share and save and spend smart mantra. So there's just a lot out there to help get kids excited about money.
Well, that's awesome. And I think you pointed out something is that we forget about in financial literacy is you have to make it fun and engaging.
Yes.
So much of the stuff is dry.
Yeah. Well, it's because there is no shortage of people out there, and I've done it myself, posting numbers and the sky is falling information about financial literacy, how student debt is this high, and people don't understand how to, make simple financial decisions. People are, in your world, they don't understand insurance, whatever it might be. There's no shortage of that information and numbers, but ultimately people really respond to stories and they respond to characters. And obviously kids really respond to that. But it's not just the kids, it's also the parents, getting them excited about these ideas of sharing and saving and spending smart and realizing, it's pretty straightforward. Like this doesn't have to be overly complex to get down to the nitty gritty, which ultimately is about establishing really good money habits.
I love that it doesn't have to be overly complex, because I think that's also what we tend to do is we boil the ocean with financial literacy. When people are just trying to accomplish one or two things is, the stats are mind-boggling, but they haven't changed. I've been involved with financial literacy for 20 years, and people are not becoming more financially literate overall, according to the studies, but I'm not sure that's 100% accurate. I think that people are learning certain habits, but it's not necessarily reflecting, like you said, in excess college debt. And I think that's it, is making that connection like you're trying to make with something relatable like Joe the monkey and saving. Because
Yeah.
then people can say, a kid can say, like, okay, well, I get Joe the monkey, you know, and what Joe the monkey is trying to accomplish versus, you know, a kid's not going to be really interested in another math lesson.
Yes, that's true. And math will play a part, obviously. I think to your point, one of the there certainly is more awareness of this, of the idea, and now there's more kind of effort in terms of going into schools. But ultimately, you're going to have new generations coming into the kind of educational fold, right, and the entertainment fold, and so there's going to be a cycle of needing to learn these things again and again. And what makes it difficult is that in many cases, well, not in many cases, in almost all cases, we're going against human nature because, human nature is to desire things, right? And that's really at the core of of understanding money smarts, is the idea that you have to be able to calculate the opportunity cost. You don't even have to necessarily even know the term opportunity cost. You just have to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to get this thing. So, whatever toy it might be, and I can't have this thing. I have to forego that, right? And ultimately, that's something that everybody has to learn. And it's going against, what makes it difficult is that it is going against this human nature that we have, and trying to through to our kids that we have to be wary of just accumulating stuff, for example, without some kind of plan. Because even for people who have all the means in the world, say like a Jeff Bezos, right? He's only going to be able to experience 0.0000001% of what's on offer on Earth, right? Or even beyond Earth, right? So that's Jeff Bezos. So what about for people who have, orders of magnitude, less wealth than he does? There's just always going to be trade-offs, and we have to figure out, a lot of this is helping our kids understand how to make those trade-offs.
Yeah, I think that really is a whole part of the conversation that we need to have, is the trade-offs. The trade-off is saving for a long-term goal versus short-term gratification. We can talk about intentional spending, paying yourself first, and all those concepts, but it does come down to that bigger thing, is, like, okay, well, what do you want? And you can't have it all.
Yeah.
That's the tough part.
And it
And
comes
I
down,
want.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, you know, you mentioned math earlier, and I think part of it is that there's a math issue in this country. I mean, do you find that with kids?
You know, I don't, that's a good question. It's less because what we're talking about here, because we focus on the basic habits. So setting and saving for goals, or I should say, these are the money smart skills at the beginning. So it's setting and saving for goals, distinguishing between needs and wants, and making smart money choices. There's not really any complex math that's involved in any of these things. And then ultimately, so that's for the younger kids, right? That's just getting those are the kind of skills we want to develop. And then ultimately, as they get to be tweens and teens, we want them to be heading out into the world and have inculcated these habits of portion saving some portion of whatever money they're making, means living beneath their means, and then long investing, which is just investing for the long term and understanding the difference between investing and speculating. And obviously, on the investing side, there's going to be significant amount of math if you want to understand, if you want to get into investing from the standpoint of, say, Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. But for the majority of us, we're talking about putting something in a long-term index fund, right? And so we're not, math is not, it's not the primary driver of the skills, and it's not the primary driver of the habits. It is something that you want to have your basic math skills in place in order to make the calculations you're going to need to make, whenever it comes to tax time, or making probability calculations with regard to insurance. And there can be some complexity there, but you also can rely on trusted experts like yourself to help you answer those kind of questions. So to your question about the math side of things, I mean, the numbers say that our math skills here in the US are going down, and that COVID was not helpful in that area. And so that does raise an alarm bell where we need to make sure that we're improving that side of the equation at the same time as we are trying to get across or trying to teach these kids money smarts.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And I think that's something that we tend to forget, is that math is a part of that later decision making. But as you say, the front part are the habits and the goals and everything else. And that the math comes later and can be a tool to help you achieve your goals.
Yeah.
So,
like, it's good to have heuristics in your head, like the rule of 72, and be able to just take the interest rate of something and divide 72 by that interest rate to figure out how quickly your money is going to double. And those are very useful heuristics. That's the reason people, bring it up and talk about it. And it's fairly simple, but you do need to understand, you need to understand how division works. And you do need, I think what's interesting about that rule of 72 is that if you start to understand how compounding works, you do realize the power of time. And that's the thing that our kids have in spades. That's the big opportunity. As adults, we look back and we say, oh, if you just, we're thinking to ourselves, if I just either knew about this or followed my grandfather's advice earlier, I'd be great. I want to make sure my kids do this. But this gets to one of the most important things, which is that the kids have to learn through their own experiences, right? They're not going to internalize messages as well through classroom learning as they are through their own experience. And that's why our focus is always on getting those parents, helping parents or guardians start an allowance for the kids, because the allowance is the conduit to those kids having their own money experiences. And it's through that they learn how to set and save for goals. They learn to distinguish needs versus wants and understand opportunity costs, and then make smarter money choices, and ultimately make mistakes. Where they're going to make mistakes, they can learn from those mistakes. We as parents can kind of be their guides along the money smart journey. And that is the power of, and the importance of, starting early, getting money in their hands, opening up a conversation, something you and I have talked about often, because you're just trying to break down the taboos of money smart conversation. And if you do that, you open this money conversation, then it becomes an opportunity for them to learn through their experiences, not be worried about mistakes, understand that the mistakes are part of the process, and then they can move from school age to tween to teen, and hopefully head out into the world ready, where you try to get them ready for that transition.
definitely. Well, and that's the thing, is allowances can be a powerful teaching tool. So, John, here's a big question. I'm sure this is something that you deal with all the time. It's great, people know that they have to do this, but what about when the parents don't feel comfortable with their own money? Do they shy away from starting an allowance or being able to use it as an effective tool? Can Joe the monkey help parents too?
It's a great question. And I want to take a step back to, we were talking about the origin story. So one of the things that I realized was that I thought that the Money Mammals could teach kids money smarts, but that's not really what is happening. What's happening is the Money Mammals are getting kids excited about money smarts. So it primes the pump for them. And it primes the pump for the parents then to step in and to start an allowance. And a lot of parents, myself included, are carrying around either, money shame or, mistakes that we've made. I mean, you and I talked about the credit cards that we've made, with mistakes that we made when we were younger. So I wrote a book called The Art of Allowance for parents. It's a short book. And the reason that I wrote it is it's the book that I wish I had. And I just want to empower parents and have them realize those mistakes are not bugs in the system. Those are opportunities that you can use in the teaching of your kids. And the other thing is, we're not talking about anything complex when we're talking about starting an allowance and having your kids start to learn about setting and saving for goals and distinguishing needs and wants. These are all things that if we're not doing a great job in our own lives, we can adjust. I made adjustments in my own life to be a better model for my kids. And actually, I think embracing the process as a parent is actually a wonderful opportunity to address any of these concerns that we have, head on, and share some of the mistakes that we made on an age-appropriate basis with our kids. And so when I talk about this money smart journey, we're going on the money smart journey together. And so that's why now our overall program is really engaging kids and then empowering parents and recognizing that the learning comes from the experience, and the empowering the parents is all about getting them to have open conversations with their kids about money, to break down the taboos and give kids money so that they can have their own experiences. And when you have an allowance system that's like that, sometimes people will say, that feels like a giveaway. It's not. It's a system. It is a system to help them learn how to become money smart in their own way. And every kid is going to be different. Every kid within every family is going to be different. And the allowance allows them to learn, at their own pace, based on what their preferences are. Some kids are going to be more into the share jar and charitable giving. Other kids are going to be more into the spend smart jar. Our kids are completely different, have completely different money personalities, very much like my wife and I. My wife and I have very different money personalities. And recognizing that and seeing that as an opportunity is what we do as parents. We do this in every area of parents. If we have more than one kid, is we recognize how different they are and we adjust the conversations that we have with them in order to help their different personalities thrive.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So I think really what you're saying is that parents also need to understand where they're coming from with their own personal money story and everything they bring into it. And then, have that money conversation with your couple, because that's the other thing is many couples don't have good conversations or quality conversations with their partner about their money. And so it's hard if you can't even have that conversation and then have the conversation with your kids.
Well, Tony, I run these Art of Allowance Academy courses, and the most common question, or actually one of the most common questions that will come up will be a parent who's on there, not with the partner, who says, well, what if you're totally misaligned with your partner? And I've actually talked on my podcast with some financial therapists about this issue. And that's the first thing that you do need to address. And a financial therapist is not a bad place to start, but that is going to make things more difficult. If you're not in alignment with your partner about having these conversations, it's going to make the conversations with the kids more difficult. So my suggestion, I am not a therapist, but is figure out a way to have those conversations. The problem is not going to go away, right? You have to find some way where you can either have an objective third party help you figure that out, or have some kind of conversation where you do address the issues that you're having, but it is not going to go away on its own. It is something that does need to be actively addressed, because that way, and just think about it from the most important aspect, which is we want to be able to help our kids together. And that doesn't mean that you all have to be perfectly aligned, but it does mean that you have to have some alignment so that the communication that's going to your kid isn't either, hypocritical or confusing, So they have a clear idea, because kids are so insightful and they're so able to see. I mean, they're, Tony, they will call you on your BS very quickly. And if they don't call you, they're just at least thinking about your BS, right? And if they see that you are both misaligned, then they'll play you off against each other. And that's going to make the learning that much more difficult. And so it's definitely worth trying to address. And a financial therapist can be a good place to start.
Definitely. Well, and I think you said something that all parents know is kids are very good at learning how to play their parents off of each other when it benefits them. They all have that unique talent.
Yeah.
So, one question is, because a big part of what you do with your work is that you help financial institutions. So how do you do that? How do you help financial institutions like credit unions engage families through financial education? What's the benefit to the financial institution?
Well, we're very fortunate to work with some terrific credit union partners who really go into their communities in all different ways. So they'll go in and have library programs, they'll have school programs, and we provide materials on the Money Mammals level. We also have material for our Adolescence program for tweens and teens, so they can go into schools and show them some of the media that we have. And then we have points for discussion and activities. And these institutions have fantastic folks, either on the community development side or on the marketing side, who will go into classrooms or provide the materials for the teachers to get this important information to the kids and make it fun for them. And then they'll also go out in their community. We have, like a Joe the Monkey costume, so they'll be out there and community events, and that will open parents' eyes. Because one of the things I always say is, like, 100% of parents answer yes to the question, do you want to raise a money smart kid? But you're not always aware as a parent that this is something that you need to start early. And when you find out, oh, wow, this is something that I need to start, and maybe starting early, by building good habits early and not having to break them later, that's something I might need to get started on this earlier than I thought. And so that's one of the big benefits. The other thing is that our credit union partners recognize that when you help parents get more money smart and help kids get more money smart, they end up being better members, which is what the credit unions call customers, because they are owners of the credit union. So these members then are just more financially savvy. And that's going to be the kind of thing generationally that will have benefits, But on the other hand, on the immediate side, what you're doing is just enabling these credit unions to connect with the very young Gen Z kids, Gen Alpha, and even the millennial generation who are now having kids. Just imagine if your brand is the one that is associated with the Money Mammals, and then parents discover that, oh, this is something I need for my kids, and then their kids learn money smart habits through your institution. That's a huge loyalty bonus for these credit unions. And so we're very fortunate to work with just some really interesting, enlightened teams that get out in the community. They do really creative stuff. They'll cover they'll cover a smart car and Money Mammals characters, and that's driving through town, again, driving awareness, and then going into schools, going to community events. And it's fun to see what all these folks are able to do with this program that we've been building for close to 2 decades now.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. And of course, the big question is, do you wear the Joe the Monkey costume?
In fact, in the catalog, that is me in the Joe the Monkey costume.
Awesome, because I know that's probably the pressing question everybody has right now. It's like, who's in the Joe the Monkey costume?
The other question is, people are like, did you sing the songs? And I did not sing the songs. That was a guy named Don Fralazzo, although I did sing the temp songs, and realized that, even though I've been singing for a long time, I'm not a professional.
Yeah, there is something to that. My niece is a voice actress, and it's a whole different level.
It is a whole different level. Like I was talking to my Randall Chrisman, who did our music. He's like, I think we're going to double your tracks, which is like standard thing you do for people who don't have perfect pitch like Paul McCartney, because when you double the tracks, it kind of makes it sound a little bit better. I was like, that sounds great. Let's do that.
Well,
Makes it more
awesome.
palatable.
That's awesome. Well, and just before we get to the quick questions is, I think one thing I want to underline is that not only for credit unions, but for insurance companies and stock brokerages, wirehouse, whatever financial service companies, is you can really support and create more loyalty with your clients by actually reaching out to them, because insurance companies are really horrible about how they treat their existing client base. Sorry for people in the insurance industry, but you've heard me say this before, is you actually have to get out there and do things for your clients. So you could do a program like Money Mammals. This is not an ad for Money Mammals. I recommend Money Mammals, but I'm not getting paid by John to support Money Mammals. But you can do a program like that, and you'd be amazed at how that helps you with your client retention, because you're helping your clients and doing something for them besides just taking their money. So,
well, I appreciate that, Tony. I think you're right. I think there is a big opportunity there for institutions to really connect emotionally with their existing customers and potential customers.
yeah, I love that. So, John, let's wrap up with what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. 3 quick questions to help our listeners change the way they think about money. So, first of all, what money myth are you trying to break?
That is a good question. I would say probably the biggest one is that I think any parent can be their kid's guide on the money smart journey. And that was really the purpose of the book, and the idea of the Art of Allowance Project is that parents can be empowered to help their kids become money smart at whatever, whether you are a brilliant CPA or you're someone who is right now mired in credit card debt. You can go through the process of improving yourself to become a better model, especially if you start this earlier, and learn the basics along with your kids. So I think that's a really important part, because there are a number of parents out there who feel like they just can't, they're not in a position to be their kids' guides. But the thing I would say to those folks who are concerned about it is say, if not you, then who? And the who is probably going to end up being, friends of the kids, and you don't know what they're talking about, social media influencers, and the odds of them running into trustworthy social media influencers is probably pretty low, and you don't know if they're going to learn it in schools. And so it's really important that we do this in the homes and that parents can become empowered.
That's awesome. And, just to emphasize is that anybody can do this. And I've heard this from other financial literacy advocates and authors and educators that I've had on the program that work with kids. It's a great opportunity to learn along with your kid and to fix any issues you may have. So that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up. So the next question is, let's get out the time machine for a minute. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now about money?
That is the easiest thing, which is my grandfather's advice to me when the day I graduated college. I actually have a picture of this. Was live beneath your means and understand the power of compound interest. And I was by no means a spendthrift, but I definitely came out to Hollywood, not the best place to learn how to live beneath your means. And it took me a while and a smart partner decision with a wife who has always lived beneath her means to really understand what that meant. So the young me would have been much more means living and also socking away a lot more money to understand to take advantage of the power of compounding.
Yeah, and there's nothing like time. I mean, that's what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger say their favorite holding period is forever.
Forever. Exactly.
So can't go wrong with that. So, John, to wrap up, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
The number one tip is that we really want parents to start early. I think also schools should start this early because it's all about banking experiences, kids banking experiences, and then learning from those experiences because we learn from experience, we learn from modeling, and we learn from direct instruction. But experience is the big teacher in the money equation because we have to learn how money makes us feel. So getting started early is the key.
I love that. I was just reminded I used to be a raft guide, and that's what they said about making your move to set up for a rapid is that you can never set up too early. That however early you think it is, you should already be moving. So,
That makes sense.
yeah. So, John, where can people learn more about you, pick up a copy of the books, and find out about the Art of Allowance Project?
The best place is to go to themoneymammals.com. You can find out all about our materials, the books, the money mammals themselves, watch some of their fun videos, and also about our program for institutions for credit unions right there as well. So themoneymammals.com.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to John's website, his social media channels, to where you can pick up his books and everything. So, John, thanks for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Tony, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was a blast. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to get my newsletter with updates about the podcast and free access to the Get Ready toolkit of financial literacy resources. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.